turned on here. So yeah, like I said, for those of you that are just now joining us, make sure that unless you're speaking, that you do mute your microphone so we don't get the feedback. Yeah, it looks like we've got everybody muted, so that's awesome. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. We've got a lot to talk about tonight. I know a lot of people too have questions about the case study and all of that, but hopefully once we talk about data analysis a little bit more tonight and I show you how to do some of those things, then it'll make this whole assignment a whole lot easier. And then at the end, I'll just host a Q&A. Regarding the case study that's due August the 4th. And for those of you that may not be aware, I did do a video with instructions and demonstrations and stuff like that for the case study as well that's due in Module 3. So, is there any burning questions that you guys have before we get started tonight? Okay, let's get into the PowerPoint because I know that's just the most exciting thing that we do. All right, here we go. Yeah, and if I forget to share at some point, y'all tell me because I'm notoriously bad about forgetting to share with you guys. Okay, so data analysis. Now, if you're one of those people that has been doing this forever, then you're probably like, oh, this is like crazy. I don't want to hear this. But for a lot of people, they've never really done in-depth data analysis. So there's many different ways to do it. You can do it by hand. You can use, there's a lot of programs out there that do this for you, spreadsheets, etc. But there's some basic skills that you need to understand that's going to help you do this. So this is actually a PowerPoint that I got from, it's called the Innovation Network. They're a consulting agency that works with lots of different schools and districts across the country. And like I said, I think their data analysis stuff is probably one of the better sort of succinct processes. So that's why we're using theirs tonight. All right, so let's talk about it. Well, first of all, when we do data analysis, far too often we go through this whole exercise and many times we start out and we feel completely overwhelmed by the data. So if you have looked at the Texas data for elementary school number 233 that I sent you, it's a ton. It's like, I don't even remember, 60, 70 pages worth of data. Well, for someone like me, I know exactly what I need. I'm going to go in and look for it, but I've been doing this for 35 years. For the average teacher, you're like, oh my gosh, where do I start? So remember when we talked about, last week, and you've seen that frame the question tool? That's why that's so important. Because I can give you 60, 70 pages worth of data and it can feel very overwhelming. But if I take time to decide exactly what it is I want to know from my data and I am able to formulate that question, it narrows down what I need to look at and analyze. And we'll go more into that here in a minute. The other thing that happens when we look at data is the fact that we may analyze these results and go through all of that, but we don't ever communicate. So the video this week talks about telling a story, a data story. We have to remember to put data into a system or into, some sort of communication that makes sense to other people. So when we tell a data story, we are basically capsulizing all of that information and communicating it back out to our stakeholders. Also too, lots of times we do data analysis and things, and we might even communicate, but then we fail to act on it. So if we're going to go through the entire effort of data analysis, we have to make sure that whatever it is that we discover and find in the data, we're actually going to use to improve our programs and our practice, okay? So the whole idea behind it is that you want to have a systemic effort. So who are you actually analyzing the data for? Who's your audience? So for example, in the data thing that I gave you from Texas, that like I said is ridiculously long, maybe what I want to look at is, I'm going to focus on 3rd grade reading. So there's a whole lot of information in there about 4th grade and 5th grade and all this other stuff. But I can narrow the scope immediately because I'm a 3rd grade reading teacher and I really need to pay attention to 3rd grade reading results. Okay, so that instantly takes you from 60 to 70 pages down to like 5, maybe 10. So audience matters. If I'm a principal and I noticed that on our state report card, we did great in every area except writing. And if I break it down even more, I noticed on that report card that maybe it was our students who were from a low socioeconomic standpoint that didn't do very well. So my audience at this point is, what am I going to do systemically for my school to improve writing for my low SES students? So again, tons of data out there, but I can narrow that down to what's most critical to me. I also have to make sure that whatever I come up with and the way that I analyze and communicate is very usable. One of my big pet peeves that I always had with my principals when I was supervising them was they would literally give these teachers reams upon reams upon reams of data. And it wasn't usable. It wasn't something that we could act on or that the teachers could act on. So it's really important that we make sure that that data is going to be usable. Now, there's two kinds of data, quantitative and qualitative. Primarily for the purpose of this analysis, we are looking at quantitative data. Qualitative data is when you get maybe like some survey results, things like that. Quantitative is basically numerical. Okay, both kinds of data are used in research. Quite frankly, I think it's easier to deal with quantitative data than qualitative if you want to really get into the nitty-gritty of research. So data is numerical. It can be counted or compared. So it might include things like demographic data or closed-ended survey items, attendance, scores on standardized instruments. Those are all examples of quantitative data. Qualitative, while it's important and can be very helpful to us, generally is going to be something like a narrative or a log or an experience. So you may have a focus group, or you may do an interview. You may be assigned diaries and journals to your students, so you're wanting to gather data based on those. Oftentimes, qualitative data comes from observations. So for example, a good example of qualitative data might be that I come in to observe you, and I'm looking for preponderance of evidence. So what I mean by that is that, one of the main strands for our school that year might be something like that we want teachers to ask questions of students that are on the high end of Bloom. So we're looking for analysis, synthesize, apply, those type questions. So I'm coming in and observing, and I'm jotting down your questions. So I may do a tally on how many of those questions are on the upper end of Bloom's, and that gives me some qualitative data. So you may have asked a total of 20 questions in a class, and 15 of those 20 were on the upper ends of Bloom, so now I have some qualitative data that I can act upon. Okay. Summary statistics, that's basically what we deal with when we get state reports or, report cards or whatever. And it's going to include things like the mean, the median, and the range. Hopefully you know what those are. If not, we'll talk briefly about them tonight. It may also include frequency distributions and percentage distributions. So frequency, it's pretty simple how often something occurs. So my example I just gave you about qualitative data from an observation is a good frequency distribution. So for every 20 questions you ask, 15 of them is occurred at the high end, so that is my frequency distribution. Percentage distribution is just what you would think. So we look at the percentages. I think we're all familiar with the bell curve. That's a great percentage distribution example. Okay, so let's talk about frequency distributions. So let's say that our question was this: to what extent did you increase your skills in putting together a household budget? Okay, so we know that there were 30 people that were asked this question. And they had 4 different answers. So they could say a lot, some, a little, or not at all. So what is our frequency distribution? Well, it's just how frequently or how many people in this instance responded specifically based on an indicator. So to this question, the frequency distribution is between 2 and 14. We had 2 people who said not at all, 5 people that said a little, 9 people that said some, and 14 people that say a lot.
Or you're not at school, of course, huh?
Hang on, I'm going to pull you guys back up here. I think somebody's got their microphone on. Let me see if I can identify who it is. Yeah, guys, make sure you mute.
Yeah. Yeah, I have no idea. If I'm just like guessing right now, I would say 3. Yeah, I would get 4 by 4 to be sure. Because you'll need a little.
Okay, percentage distributions. Same idea, same question, but we converted those numbers, which was the frequency, into percentages. So all we did was we took those numbers. So we took 14 and divided it by 30, and you'll notice that was 46%. We took 9, divided it by 30, and put it into a percentage distribution, which is 30%. Simple math, real easy, okay? So here's another example of how you would graph this. So again, here is the question, and here are the numbers. We had 41 respondents. 10 of them heard about the website through a court referral, or 24.4%. So then I can represent that graphically. So probably the easiest thing to do is to have a pie chart, and you can see how this is broken down. So, and again, it goes back to 24.4% had a court referral, and you'll notice that's kind of the purplish color, I guess, the lavender, okay? Now, personally, if I were going to do this pie graph, I would actually put the percentages on the graph so you could tell what they are, but in this case, they didn't, okay? Means and medians. Okay, so what is the difference? Mean is the average, okay? So, you know, if we added all these scores together, you'll see the mean is 87. What is the median? Okay, sorry. The median is 94. So if you looked at these scores and you put them on a number line, there's a total of, what, 7 scores? Your median score is the one that's right in the middle. So if I were to simply count this, I've got 7, so I have 1, 2, 3. Then I see music at 94. Then I have 93, 92, 40. All the median is what is the middle point, okay? So, you know, sometimes people ask, why would you use a median? Well, sometimes you just want to know, because they report like income. If do the census stuff or statistics, they'll talk about the median income is $50,000. All that means is that half the people that, live in a particular area have a median income higher than $50,000, and half the people have an income less. Some subtleties, again, we've got the scores across here. Sometimes the mean and the median may not be real visible. The mean is the average. So, all I do is add these up, divide, and come up pretty easily with the average, okay? How do we represent that graphically? This is just a histogram type graph. So you can see again what the frequency was, what the grades are, and how well they did. Okay, we can also get into what's called cross tabulations, and basically all that means is that you're going to have 2 different kinds of data that you're looking at. So here is the raw data, so it talks about program type, area of inquiry, and the outcome. Now let's look at what that looks like in a cross tabulation, okay? So you've got the outcome by count and what the outcomes were. So they, it was either not satisfied, pending, or satisfied. They give you the grand totals. Then they do the same thing and they put it into percentages, okay? So what does that look like? You can see here in a graph, as well as here with more specific information, okay? Because they've included, like I said, not just staff, but advice, facility, other indicators as well, okay? So how do you do this? You can do a paper and pencil, word processing, spreadsheet, or there are lots of custom databases available. So with qualitative data, like I said, we're looking at transcripts, notes, surveys, photographs, videos, kind of what many of us would call more anecdotal evidence. It's not something that is necessarily going to be quantitative. Now you can take qualitative data and make it quantitative data, if you choose to, okay? Qualitative analysis, goes into, again, you identify themes or patterns, you kind of look as you go, etc. Okay, and so here's a sample data sheet that includes information on the site, the interviewee, the date, the length, the question, all those kind of things. But that is just the data that we're going to get. So, talking about communicating our findings, if we don't, again, like I said earlier, if we don't communicate what we found with our data, then it's not going to be put to use, and it just becomes an exercise in futility, quite frankly. So, who might be those people we need to communicate to? And again, I'm not going to read to you. It can be anybody. It could be the students. It could be the parents. It could be your business advisory members. It could be anybody, okay? You have to think about now who needs the data, but what form do they need the data in? So is it better to give them a written report? Or we can give them a data book, a flyer, a poster, a website. There's lots of different ways that we can report data. So it depends on, obviously, our audience. So if I'm wanting to share with maybe my whole community for my school, it's going to be pretty hard for me to give everybody a data book. But a website might be really efficient if we post it on our website. If it's for the board and I'm reporting in front of them, it's probably going to be a formal presentation. I'm not going to expect them to go to a website. But lots of different ways to report our data. It's always important, no matter what strategy we use, that whatever data we're analyzing, it really helps us to determine whether or not we're meeting our outputs or our desired outcomes, and should include the areas where we're strong as well as some areas where we're challenged. We also need to make sure, too, that any assertions we're making about a school or program should be actually supported by the data. Okay? All right. So, how do you organize this? Again, I'm not going to go through all this. This is just one method. You can certainly have an overview, your program, what did we do? But this kind of gets into more of that action planning piece. So we'll talk more about that as it gets closer, but just to kind of give you some scaffolding and foundational information. Okay? Skip through some of this. Okay? You may also want to make sure, too, that you understand when you're doing data analysis that you know who were the participants. If you looked at that Texas data set that I gave you, it includes enrollment, and it's broken down by grade level, gender, ethnicity, at-risk codes, that kind of stuff. It's important to know, so when I'm looking at my data, I can actually understand who it is that is being impacted. So, for example, if you're thinking in terms of sheer statistics, let's say that we have 500 students in third grade. And of those 500 students, 400 of them are Hispanic, 90 are white, and we only have 10 that are African American. Well, obviously, we have more room within 400 Hispanic students for there to be a low score without it absolutely devastating our overall outcome. So what I mean by that is, if I've got 400 students and I have 20 fail, it's not going to be nearly as impactful on my overall passing rate than if I have 10 African American students and only 2 of them fail. You see what I'm getting at? That the smaller your population, the more impactful each student is on your overall results, okay? So, once we analyze the data, we also need to know these pieces. And again, like I said, we'll talk more about that when we get into the action planning part, okay? So, we also want to ask ourselves when we do data analysis, what was validated? How did this affect different populations or different groups of students and individuals? How are we going to address these findings? And, what does it tell us that maybe is new that we haven't thought about? Okay? So what do you do with all this data? Make sure, you've heard this from me before, analyze frequently. I'm a firm believer in an exit ticket and a daily quick formative assessment. That's pretty important. Formative assessment is our best and most powerful data. We have to remember to act on our results, and we have to monitor our progress along the way, and then we have to communicate how we're doing. Okay? So that was your whirlwind tour of Data analysis. Okay, so I was just trying to look here to see what the questions are. Oh, what do you do if you have an even amount of data? What's the median? DeMarcus asked. Basically, what you do is you take the two middle numbers and average them. Okay, so if you've got 6 data elements, and let's say the two numbers in the middle are both, I don't know, see what math I can do in my head. You've got a 50 and a 100. Those are your two closest numbers in the middle. You would add the two together. 50 and 100 makes 150. Divide by 2 is 75. So your median is 75. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Let me switch screens again. Hang on. Sorry. Go away. There we go. All right. So let's talk about, sorry, I keep having all this other stuff pop up. Let's talk about our favorite assignment that everyone is so in love with, our case study. Okay, so can you guys see, just give me a thumbs up. Are y'all seeing my Moodle? Okay, all right. So we are in week 3. What do you have due this week? Well, you've got a bunch of articles to read. They're all posted here. We've got our discussion forum and lots of people. I've got 91 posts I need to read. So you know what I'm going to be doing all weekend. The discussion forum, and then here's our case study. Not due until August the 4th, okay? So I don't want to be redundant in terms of what I've already put in the video, so I'm going to move through super fast and be thinking about what questions you have, okay? So here we go. When I click on this, there is a litany of different pieces. I mean, this is a lot. But let's say that there's a couple things here that are key. So what do you need that's most important? Well, here's your template, because you're going to use that to complete the assignment. That's pretty important. Then you've got your directions, okay, which walks you through what you need to do. Then I took all of this because I have some Mac users, and sometimes Macs don't like in Moodle when you have all these attachments. I don't know what it is, but I have that issue at home on my MacBook. So I put all of these tools that you see here into a single folder, okay? So it's not something new, it's not something different, it's just all these elements that I stuck in a single folder, okay? Then you've got all these different tools, starting with tool 1A all the way through tool 7B. Now, I do not know why this one ends up here at the top. It should ideally be down here, but sometimes Moodle doesn't format the way I want it to. So what are those things that I need to focus on? Well, I can use all these tools if I choose to. You don't have to. So anything that says tool 1A, tool 1A, and some of them, like tool 1A is listed twice. One's a Word document, one's a PDF. They're the same thing, it's just two different formats. So you can always kind of tell by the little symbols over here. I can use any of these tools that I want to, but I don't have to. But let's say I'm one of those people who really needs this to kind of guide my thinking, and I decide to do all of them. If you do them and submit them with your assignment, you will get 3 extra points on your final grade for the course, okay? So, you know, it's going to take you a lot of time to do them, but I'm going to recognize that through extra credit. You also have the Clark County Data Analysis Planning Guide. Again, I'm not going to
repeat that one more time.
Read it.
Can you repeat that?
Did somebody have a question?
Yes. Can you repeat what you just said? I was trying to write and I kind of missed that part.
No, that's okay. So you heard me talk about the tools, right? So the Clark County Data Analysis Planning Guide. You don't have to read it. I'm not going to grade you or quiz you about whether or not you read it. But let's look at it so that you can understand why this may be important. Sorry, wait on my computer. Okay. All right. So the reason that you may want to do this is it's a pretty nice example of how you do this. You know, and it talks you through, so you can see I pulled some of the template pieces out of here, but it talks about, like, here's a map of how you would go about doing this, okay? Very similar to what the tools that I've given you as well as the data-wise process. But it breaks it down for you and talks about what this looks like, okay? Then goes into some of the purposes and things like that, as well as individual examples of what each element within the template might mean. Okay, so like I said, I'm not expecting you to regurgitate this or anything like it, but if you're one of those people that likes guides and models, you're going to love this. If you feel like you don't need it, fine, don't open it. Your choice, okay? But it explains what some of these things mean, and it gives you, again, some examples. Okay, so if you're really lost and you're like, I don't know what that means by metric, you can come over here and look and hopefully get some support and some help. Okay, so let me close this, and hopefully the right thing will come back up. There we go. Okay, so the other thing that you have in here is you've got a couple, there's one, two, where's the other one? Three. You have 3 articles to read. Again, background, foundational information. You don't necessarily do anything with them other than read them. So let's talk first about the directions for the assignment. Okay, sorry, let me get it to where it's not looking so wonky. Here we go. All right, so basically I'm telling you read the article. I just told you that a minute ago. There are 2 sets of data in the assignment. Actually, I think I've taken out the middle school one because it was so generic, it wasn't helpful. So we have the elementary school for Texas, okay? And you can use the tools that are in the zip files or the actual files in the folder. Remember the tools, it's all the same stuff. One folder for zip if you like that better, or if you like to click on specific attachments, it's already there for you. There are 7 of those. Goes all the way through 7B. And I've made sure there's Word versions of everything. If I missed one, just email me or, you know, whatever, let me know, text me, etc. For you, okay? So you're going to read the article. You're going to look at a data set. You can either use my data, or if you've got classroom data or school data or parish data, use your data. Then you don't even have to worry about mine, okay? I'm only providing mine in case you can't get to your data, or maybe you don't work in a school system, so you need some data to look at, okay? So you're going to look at the data plan. You're going to then look at the template, and you're going to start putting things into it, okay? So you have 2 things that you're doing. You have a template that you're going to complete, as well as a PowerPoint, okay? The PowerPoint should be between 10 to 16 slides, and you're just going to answer these 10 questions, okay? So I walked you through, when I did the instructions video, how to answer each one of these questions, so I'm not going to go through that again, but if somebody has a specific question about one of those, we'll do that kind of at the end. So what do you actually turn in? You only have to turn in 2 things. The template and your PowerPoint. That's all you have to turn in. That's all you must submit. If you choose to do all these tools, like I said before, you will get extra credit. And it's 3 extra points on the final grade of the course. Okay? All right, so let me close that and go back to...
I have a question about using the tools.
Uh-huh.
So there's a lot of bulleted questions on the left side of most of the tools.
Mm-hmm.
Should we be aiming to try to answer each of those questions, or just kind of read through them and try to answer like 1 or 2 from each section?
You know, Catherine, it's really up to you because it's your tool. No, I'm not expecting you to answer every single bullet in terms of a grade. Pick out those questions that are most helpful to you in terms of understanding the data. You know, that's a litany of questions. You know, certainly you're not going to answer every single one. So, you know, just pick out the ones that you feel like are most helpful to you. Okay?
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so now let's look at the template. Okay, here we go. All right, so the first part of the template, like I explained, is you. It's about you. So you have 2 tasks to complete this template. So you have the learning target and what it means, and this is what it means to you. Again, I'm not looking for the scientific right answer. You know, if you don't know what it is, just say that. I have no idea what this is, because that helps me to know where I need to assist you in mastering this material. Then you're going to rate yourself, okay? And then the reflection is, tell me tell me why you rated yourself the way you did. So let's look at the first one. It says, explain how improvement planning will improve student learning and system effectiveness. Well, for me, I know that when I can identify my students who are performing poorly on certain objectives, then I can create targeted RTI plans to assist these students. I can do maybe some cross-curricular grouping. You know, I know all the instructional ways that this is going to help me. And I would put that into some sort of a sentence. And I'm going to rate myself pretty high. I can teach someone else, because obviously I hope I can, or we're all in trouble here with this class. So why am I rating myself this way? It's because I have 35 years of experience doing this stuff. Okay? Now, let's say you get down to this one where it says, what does it mean when they say I can identify where school performance did not meet expectations? If you don't know how to do that, just say so. This means, you know, I'm unclear how to do this or what this means. So I rate myself as I don't even know what this is. And why did I rate myself this way? I've never done this kind of data analysis before. That's okay, guys. Like I said, I'm not expecting you to be experts. That's why you're taking the course. Okay?
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, for this section, I basically, for learning target, I put kind of the definition, and under reflections, I put how I used it in my research. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Rate myself. That's okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like I said, this is really your tool. It's like your own personal self-assessment of where you are with all this. Okay? So you've got basically a page and a half of those. Then you come here to these questions. These are guiding questions. That's all they are. So I'm not asking you to answer them. But what might be some data pieces that you're given at your school or like in my stuff? And it's, you know, what are the demographics? What are perceptions? You know, blah, blah, blah. So as you're thinking about, you know, you've got all this huge data piece, particularly in the one that I gave you from Texas, that School 233. I'm going to pick out some elements that I'm going to analyze. I'm not going to analyze all of this. I mean, you know, unless you're a full-time data analytics person, you're not going to do all that. So, you know, depending on my role, I'm going to pick. So if I'm the GT teacher, what am I interested in? I'm probably going to be interested in my standardized test results and how does that align with our gifted and talented plan in my district. If I'm a high school teacher and I teach algebra, I'm probably most interested in my standardized test results, as well as maybe what are some of my students' attitudes about mathematics. You can pick and choose. It's kind of like, you know, you're ordering at Wendy's. Pick and choose what you want. You're customizing your data to meet your needs. Do not analyze all of this, because I really am not wanting a dissertation from you. You can do that in your career later on. Okay, so once I decide the data elements that I want to focus on, and you can focus on just one, you can focus on two. I would tell you don't do more than three. Okay, so 1 is fine, 2 is fine, 3 is fine, 4 is too many. It gets too complex too quickly. And, you know, this is an overview. This is not, like I said, I'm not training you to go be the data analyst for, you know, your school system. Okay, so once I decide on that data, the first thing it's asking me to do is, what is the data? And now it talks here about the school improvement plan. If you have a school improvement plan, you can reference it and use it. If you don't, that's fine. You don't have to worry about that part. Just answer the question. So what have been our trends over time? Well, if you don't have 2 years of data at least, you can't do a trend. If you're using the Texas data, we gave you 3 years worth, so you can then go in and say, you know, gosh, what I'm noticing is that in 3rd grade reading, we had a very, you know, we went from 90%, then we dropped to 60%, then we went back up to 80%. So what's our trend? Well, it's kind of all over the map, you know, and so what I've got to figure out then is, on down here, is what's causing that to happen. Where did I get this from? If you use my data, just put in Texas Elementary School 233. Or you can put in, I don't know, Benton Elementary, but it's wherever you got your data from, okay?
Can I get some clarification on what you just said a while ago? You said 1 to 3 is fine, but no more than 3. Are you referencing the questions at the top?
Now I'm talking about the data elements you're going to analyze. So
we'll only analyze up to 3 pieces.
Yes, 3 pieces of data. Yeah, because like I said, if you're looking like at your district or your parish data, there's going to be a ton of information in there. I don't want you to analyze every element of it. Like I said, it'll take you forever. Just pick 1, 2, or 3 data pieces to do this exercise, okay? So again, I'm not going to walk you through all these questions, but yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Dr. Jones. One really quick thing. So you're saying only 3 data pieces. Are we talking about like their LEAP scores, their DAYS scores, and their DIBBLE scores? Or are we talking about like literacy, their numeracy, stuff like that, like skills?
Yeah, Richard, depending on what you've got, because, not seeing your data, it's a little hard to answer, but I would be real specific. I would look at 3rd grade LEAP scores, or I'd look at 3rd grade DIBBLE scores. I wouldn't do all 3. I wouldn't do LEAP scores for the school, DIBBLE scores, et cetera. Does that make sense? I'd get really specific.
Yeah. So like grade level, 1 test, 1 data point, that's 1 thing.
Yeah. Okay. And I can even go deeper. So for example, when I was in Dallas, we had a very high Hispanic population, and we didn't have a real high African American population. So we were really concerned about their achievement. Always seemed to be way off in terms of our overall averages. So I might even look just at my African American 3rd grade reading scores. And you can get that specific if you choose to. Okay? But yeah, the more specific you start with in terms of what you want to analyze, the easier this is to do. Okay? So moving along. So again, this is just kind of tell me about your data source. So what assessment? Well, I'll use Richard's example, 3rd grade LEAP scores. What was the content area? Well, I'm going to look just at reading. Okay. When was it available? Just tell me when you got your scores. Generally you can put spring, whatever year. That's pretty simple. Which students am I focusing on? Well, do I want to look at all 3rd grade results? That's fine. In my case, I wanted to look just at African American results. Okay. What's the grade level? 3rd grade. What are the metrics? Okay. Now what we mean when we talk about metrics here is, are we looking at advanced scores? Or are we looking at college ready scores? Or are we just simply looking at passing scores? Just tell me which element you're specifically looking at. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. What are your data views or reports? Again, it's somewhat repetitive. Just tell me that this is your, I don't know, Benton Elementary School LEAP report. Okay? And then
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
You give just for some of us that have lower level, like 1st grade, we don't have any standardized tests yet. Just a few other examples that we could maybe think of.
Yeah, you could maybe do, so if you think about your students from last year, you probably did some formative assessments with them. Mm-hmm. You could the assessment could be Tracy's for example, we don't have standardized tests in this course, so I might want to do my assessment on your midterm. So I could say midterm assessment, teacher made. Content area and focus, well, it's going to be on professional learning communities. When is this going to be available? Well, in 2 weeks when you actually do the midterm. Which students? I want to look at all of you. Grade levels for your graduate students. Does that kind of make sense? You can pick anything.
Yeah, so could we do like kind of what we did for our SLTs?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you've got, a lot of students in kinder and first, you have screeners, you'll do a DIBBLES, you may do a fluency test, you could look at their attendance, you can look at how many students got pink eye. I mean, it's really up to you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so how do you develop your trend statements? So like I said, this is very almost repetitive in a sense. So again, what's my performance indicator? Well, you told me up here, What content area? Again, third grade reading.
Casey.
Yeah.
So it's a really long chart, but we only actually having to complete one?
Yeah.
One row?
Uh-huh. Depending on, if you do one data element, you do one row. If you're going to be really ambitious and do two, you would do 2 rows. Okay, but yeah.
But if you're looking at 3 years of data to see trends, would you put them, even though it's the same test, would you put it 3 times and just change the year?
You can, or you can combine them. It's really your personal preference. And I'll show you kind of what I mean here about that in a minute. It's a good question. Yeah, and keep in mind, guys, I gave you all these extra lines, not because I expect you to fill them in, but because this might be a tool that you want to take back and use, with your PLC or in your school or whatever. And ideally, I'll tell you the way that I've used this in the past is we use this. So like in our first data meeting, we're only looking at one element. And this becomes almost like a running log. So in our next data meeting, we're going to look at a different element. So we're going to add it here. So by the end of the year, we may fill this whole thing up. But for this purpose, no, guys, I'm not expecting you to fill all this in. Okay? So again, you may have a blank pages even. That's fine. If you want to delete them out, you can, or you can leave them in. I don't care. So then you get into some questions, okay? So in which indicator areas did the school not at least meet district expectations? You may or may not know that, okay? So like going back to what Melissa said, if I'm looking at something that was a survey just within my classroom, you could just put data not available. Now, if you're at Benton Elementary and you've seen the LEAP report for Bossier Parish schools, and you see that, the third graders scored at 80% across the parish, but at Benton Elementary, they scored at 95%, then we exceeded expectations. But maybe in science, Bossier Parish had a score of 90%, but at Benton Elementary in third grade, we only made a 65. So that's an area there, okay? And like I said, if you don't have the data, just tell me that. Sort of like if you get a public information request and you don't have what they're asking for, I've been told many times by lawyers, don't make something up, just tell them you don't have it. It's the same kind of thing here, guys, okay? Then this again just is narrowing it down. So what report am I looking at? Well, I'm looking at only third grade reading. So I can put NA under math. I'm looking at third grade reading. I'm looking at maybe academic growth. What is my report name? Did I look at academic achievement? I may or may not have. It's up to you. You can do all of these elements within a data piece, or you don't have to do them. Like I said, you may only want to look at growth, or you may want to look only at sheer achievement, which would be passing scores. Maybe you just really want to look at it by standard or by objective, because you're to that point with the data. You may want to look at it across groups. So like I said, you only have to do one of these right here. Okay? Does that make this a whole lot simpler? Some of you are looking at me like, yeah, got it. That's awesome. So, yeah, go ahead, Rebecca.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And if my question's redundant, I apologize. But
okay.
You're like have an overload moment, like about to have anxiety attack because I'm like getting confused. So you said one time something about 3 pieces of data, but then you're talking about we only have to do one thing. So I'm kind of getting confused at what you're talking about.
Okay, so let's go back up here. So remember, you've got all these different possible data pieces. You can pick one. Or like I said, if you're really ambitious and you're like, you know what, I'm actually going to use this in a couple weeks when school starts, and I really want to look at 3 pieces of data because that's what's going to help me with my planning. But do not do more than 3, guys. You'll drive yourselves crazy. So that's what I'm talking about when I say 1 to 3. So let's assume my data that I've chosen is going to be a standardized test. And in this case, it's the 3rd grade LEAP results from my school, Johnson's Elementary. So when I get down here to the last part of this template, since I'm looking only at 3rd grade LEAP scores for Johnson Elementary, maybe all I want to look at is their academic growth. Or maybe I want to look at their academic growth as well as their overall achievement. Maybe I want to include as well, I want to look at disaggregated group data. I can use all of these elements around that one data piece and analyze it accordingly. Or I can say, you know what, all I really care about at this point is going to be my academic growth. How much did my students grow year to year? Okay? It's probably clear as mud, right?
Okay, so like I teach 4th grade math.
Uh-huh.
I just got my scores from what they did on LEAP test in spring.
Perfect.
So I can take that score and compare it to what they did in 3rd grade for math.
Absolutely. That would be growth. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so that's the only data I'm looking at. So I want to look at, say, their academic growth.
Yeah. Yeah.
If they increase their score, you know, because we're Louisiana, we have that mastery, track to mastery or track to advance, whatever it's called. And so they go a certain amount each year.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Some schools are going to call that a growth index. Some states, you know, they use different terms. But Rebecca, I could look with that same data if I choose to. I could say, you know what was their growth? Oh gosh, my students grew, and I don't know how it's reported in Louisiana, but let's say they grew on average 1.3 years. Okay. Like I said, I don't know how it's reported. But I could also say, you know what, that I really want to look at how many just passed the assessment. I don't have to do both, but I could if you think that's helpful. Okay? So in terms of analyzing the data, let me kind of stop sharing here for a minute and go back to real quickly, back to Moodle. So I can actually pull up, okay, I'm gonna share again, guys. There we go. Okay, I'm gonna pull up the Texas data set just so we can actually work with some numbers. It may take a minute because this is a huge file. Oh, what do you know? It actually did. So I'm gonna pull up the campus data packet within my little folder here. Oh, yay, I was afraid it would take forever. Okay, so in Dallas, they gave us way too much data. So if you're looking at this lovely document that I've shared with you, it is pages and pages and pages long. It's upwards of 50 to 60 pages. Way too much data. So I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, I'm going to go through and do, you know, that chart, the template. And gosh, what do I want to look at? Well, in Texas, the equivalent of the leap is the star, okay? So I'm going to look here and I say, gosh, I've got the star results in English for reading and in math. So I'm going to look just at 3rd grade reading, okay? So I'm going to skip all these pages, because there are a lot of them, and I'm going to find the page. I may have gone too far. Sorry, guys. Hang on. Yeah, Texas even tells you how many, you know, they break it down. Okay, so on my test, this is the 3rd grade star, equivalent to the 3rd grade leap in Louisiana, and I'm looking only at grade 3. So I'm going to ignore grade 4 and grade 5 as well as the summary. And what I want to look at is my overall passing results. So I noticed that in 2016, I only had 76.2% of my students pass the test. So if you go back to the template where we talked about just the standard or the passing, that's all I would put. That's all I'm looking at. Now, if I want to look at growth or trends, you'll notice that back in 2014, we had 86.4% of the students who passed the test. But by 2016, it's dropped 1.2 points. So that's a trend. And you'll notice here that we had a drop between 2014, another drop in 2015, and another drop in 2016. So that may be all the analytics that I want to do. And that's fine for the template. Kind of makes sense? Now, if I wanted to get really sophisticated, I might want to compare it to my district because I have district results. Well, we did much better than the district all 3 years. And while we're dropping scores year to year, the district is also dropping scores. So as a data analyst, my first question is going to be, what happened? What changed that caused a decline in scores at my school as well as across my district? And it can be any number of things. Now, I happen to know what caused it because I lived it, but it could be that we changed the curriculum. It could be that we lost all of our seasoned, veteran, excellent teachers. They all retired. In reality, what happened was the state changed the test and made it more challenging and difficult. Okay? Now.
So Tracy, I'm sorry, I have a question. So like if I just looked at the at-risk, and like going back to third grade,
yeah.
If I just looked at the at-risk students, then I would put that in the disaggregated section rather than just the regular.
Yeah, you can, or you can put, I mean, you know, in terms of the template, it's really a tool to kind of help you figure it out. It's not a matter of it's got to be in a certain box. But yeah, you could put it in your disaggregated, or you could put it in just this is the data element that I'm looking at. But yeah, and that's a great question, Amy. So she only wants to look at risk. Okay? You know, maybe what I really only want to look at is my second language learners. So my LEP, limited English proficient students. What's happening with them? I can just look at all. I can just look by race or ethnicity. I can look by gender. It really depends on what it is that you want to know. You know, and I may not pay too much attention to my white students because I didn't even have enough. I mean, that sounds bad. You know, of course, we pay attention to all students. But in terms of data disaggregation, I don't have any, there weren't enough students to make a group to even count. So that's not going to be very helpful to me. It's a little more difficult too with African Americans because again, I've got years I didn't have enough students in that group for their test results to be reported. Okay. So like I said, and then, you know, if you've got this kind of, you know, but maybe I'm interested, I'm the GT teacher and I want all my students to perform at advanced. Maybe that's all I want to look at is how many students performed at advanced. And I'll tell you, it's kind of scary when you look at these numbers that in third grade, we only had, you know, our best year. Only 16% of our students, 16.7, are scoring at the advanced or college ready or on track or, you know, whatever the metric is in your state, passing the test. Okay. Now, Texas goes ahead and breaks it down by objective. You may only want to look at this element. And you say, you know what? I want to know the data I'm going to analyze is third grade scores in reading, and the only objective I'm interested in is understanding analysis of literary texts. So I'm going to analyze that data piece, and that's it. Okay? And like I said, it's simple math. You're just adding and subtracting. If it grew, you add the numbers. If it didn't, then you subtract. So like right here, 72.1 in 2014, we dropped to 66% in 2015. So that's going to be a, let's see, for 6.1 decline. Trying to see if I can find one where we actually went up. Doesn't look like we did. Okay. And like I said, Texas just reports the same data over and over and over. Okay? So, pretty simple.
Could we also even use like behavior data?
Yeah, of course.
Like
Absolutely.
number of referrals or whatnot too, if that's something we have access to.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, you know, I know as a campus, we identified certain things. We looked not only at state and formative assessments and all, but we always tracked attendance. We tracked discipline referrals. We tracked how many times, I had a very high mobility rate in my high school. So we tracked how many times kids were in and out of school. So how many times did they enter, depart, enter again, depart, etc. Because our biggest problem was our mobile students, those students who would, you know, I don't know if you have issues here, but, you know, in Texas, in the area I was in, we had a lot of students who would leave and go to Mexico for, you know, a month. They'd miss a whole month of school. So our mobility rate was really impacting our scores because they were missing months of instruction. Okay. All right. Anything help? Anything? I mean, any other questions? I hope it helped.
So I have a quick question about the developing trend statement on the data analysis planning guide. So I get the inventory of the performance data sources. It's just pretty much telling you what I'm using. So I get that.
Right.
But you said in your video or in class, I can't remember, that we needed 5 of these, the developing trend statements. And if I'm only looking, I guess, so I looked at the Louisiana middle school stuff that you posted. So I'm going to look at my own now. So I teach 7th grade English, and I was going to look to see trends within 3 years because I pulled those reports today. So I guess I don't know how to fill out 5 of these. I don't know.
Okay, so here's what I would suggest. I think since I did the video yesterday, I'm going to back way off on that. Like I said, if you're really doing this for your classroom, you're probably going to want to look at some different trends that are happening. Like I said, if going back to my 3rd grade data we just looked at. Obviously, I've looked at the all passing, and I noticed that I'm having a decline. So the next thing I want to know, if that's my trend is a decline, is it across all of my populations? Well, yeah, it was. I'm having a decline across populations, so that's my second trend. Then I'm going to look maybe at special categories. So is this happening with my LEP students, my at-risk students, and my low SES students? Well, yeah. So I'm having a decline across, groups. And then there's a decline at the district level in 3rd grade. So that's a 4th trend. So yeah, like I said, if I were doing this for real, probably 5 trend lines is going to be important because otherwise I don't understand. It's really hard if you only do 1 trend to really understand what's happening. But for the sake of this exercise, 1 is fine. Okay? Because like I say, you get to a point when you're doing the data analysis where you kind of have to, you've got to look at, I don't know, I don't want to confuse y'all. For the sake of this assignment and getting a grade from Tracy Johnson on it, you can do 1. If you're using this in real life, you probably are going to have to identify more than 1 trend to figure out what the root cause problem is.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's what I was doing today. I was looking at every single grade level compared to the state in all of the LEAP, and I was trying to find my focus, and I was so overwhelmed with the amount of data, and so it makes it easy. I teach 7th grade. I'll just look at that, and it's meaningful to me. So.
Yeah, but like I said, when you try to get to, because ultimately data analysis is identifying what's the main problem and what's causing that problem, then how do we fix it? It goes back to the PLC model where, you ask those 3 critical questions. The only way that I can figure out, or I've ever been able to figure out, is what is the root cause of this particular problem we're experiencing is. It's by doing multiple comparisons. Because like I said, when I started looking, back in 2016, and, my first thought was, gosh, why did, this elementary school have a drop? Because they're usually one of my highest performers. And then, you're beating yourself up, and then you go, but gosh, the district dropped. And then I'm noticing that it dropped, and I started comparing it to other schools with similar populations and all. And through that process, we finally realized there's something going on either with the curriculum, because in the end of the day, there's 3 things that affect school performance: curriculum, instruction, and assessment. And there's probably a problem in one of those 3 when things aren't going the way you want them to. So it's either a problem with the curriculum. Well, we hadn't changed the curriculum. We had actually made it better. We knew that. We felt like the instruction was pretty good because we had tons of anecdotal, observational, qualitative data. We'd been in classrooms. Teachers were doing what they needed to do. We didn't control the assessment. So the more we started looking at the assessment, we went, aha, they changed the test. But I would have never figured that out if I had just looked at 1 element.
Okay, so we got a new principal, and we have a lot of new teachers, and we had a new platform change, like on a virtual, just like how Moodle's a platform, we changed platforms. And so that threw everybody off. So that could be an indicator for low performance. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. For example, too, if I had tracked this school on into 2018, which I have, I just didn't post it for you guys. We had a 64.3% turnover rate in teachers in 1 year. we lost our staff. So, you know, I knew what the root cause was. That's majorly impactful. But sometimes when you're doing data analysis, it's not quite that in your face. You know what I'm saying? That's why you have to look. You know, another year our attendance was really, really bad. We got hit by a major flu bug. And we had kids who were out for weeks on end. You know, that impacted it. But like I said, for the sake of the assignment, one data point, one trend, one of everything, and you're fine. You will do great on this. But in real life, understand it's not quite that simple to get what you need to move a school forward. Okay. Any other questions?
I have one.
Yeah, go ahead, Olivia.
So I was looking at the tools this morning or this afternoon, and I'm like super kind of like stressed out about the tools. Are they absolutely necessary to do, or can I skip to the template? Because I'm pretty good at looking at the data because I've experienced it in the urban education scene.
Yeah.
Like the tools were like, I mean, I was kind of overwhelmed, about to cry. And so I just want to make sure that I don't really have to do those tools to do the template and do the PowerPoint.
Nope, the tools are just there if you need them. If you don't use them.
Okay.
Keep in mind, those tools were developed for people who had never, ever, ever even heard the word data.
Okay.
Let alone done some analysis.
Okay.
So, like I said, you know, use them if they're helpful. If not, don't, guys. Just move straight into the template. Yeah, I
All
wouldn't.
right, my stress level just went down 10 feet. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I got one.
Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
Okay, how do you want this turned in? Do you want it turned in as a folder, or do you want just all the individual files?
You can do it either way. You can put it in a folder, and the only problem is sometimes the limits on Moodle, depending on how big your folder is, won't let you upload that way.
Okay.
So it's just going to depend on how many pieces you add to the folder. It's
Well,
fine.
I have all of them.
Okay, try to upload it that way. If it doesn't work, because it tells you the file's too big, then you may have to do them attachment at a time. Or if you're familiar with Google Docs, load it into your Google Drive and send me a shareable link. If you don't know how to do that, ignore what I just said because I don't want to further complicate your lives.
Okay.
You can also try to make it a zip folder and email it to me.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so we're all feeling like, gosh, this is not as awful and as hard as I thought it was. My stress is better. I'm sorry for the few days of stress I caused you. Okay, we good? Okay, I promise you, there's nothing else that's complicated.
I have one more question.
Sure.
I have some data that I want to look at school, but I can't get to it right now. So I'm using your data. Is the second case study going to be involved with data? Will I be able to use that the second time, or no, is it going to be entirely different?
Let me look here. I'm trying to remember. Now, sorry guys, it's been one of those days where I've been crazy busy with paperwork. So when we get to the next case study, which is in Module 4, I'm opening it up as we speak. So let me share real quick. Okay, this is very much a self-evaluation. So yeah, you're gonna, ideally, if I were you, I would just go ahead and use the same data because you've already got some of these elements completed, but you don't have to. So let's say, Amy, you didn't have your school's data, so you used mine, but now you're like, you know what, I've got my school's data and I really want to do this for myself, then you can. So this is just, again, to get you used to some of the different data elements and stuff. And basically, this is something that we actually posted on our website. This was our, we made this a very public document. I don't think it's as hard, because it's things like, just tell me what your student enrollment is, ethnicity, what are your things. And if you don't know that, that's okay. Just put not available or put a question mark or something. For those of you that don't know, McKinney-Vento is homeless students. So some schools track that, some schools don't. McKinney-Vento is the name of the law that says that we, Homeless students can basically go to any school they want to. 504, I think everybody knows what that is. This is somebody asked earlier about discipline data. Here's some of that discipline piece. Tell me what's distinctive about your school. Again, pretty simple. How effective? You tell me. We've got an A grade from the state. How do you know? The state told us so. What are your notable strengths? Again, no right or wrong answers, guys. This is just really, what are your school's main areas for improvement? How do you know that you're ensuring high quality? Like I said, these are very open-ended kind of questions. So, you know, once you do the data analysis in Module 3, this should be a breeze. It's just answering questions. Okay? Not nearly as complex. Okay. All right, and we will talk next week more about this assignment as well as stuff coming up. But like I said, you're doing the hardest assignment now. And the good news is we're 3 weeks in. We only have 4 more weeks to go. And the last week really doesn't count. It's super simple. It's just your final. Okay, going once, going twice. All right, I'm going to turn off the recording.